This is an ESP8266. This is the actual chip here. This is some memory that it has connected to it. This is the wireless antenna. As you can see, it doesn't have a lot of pins. This was my first ESP8266. Its primarily use was to utilize it with AT commands to connect to the wireless device with something like an Arduino. These were quite popular for a while, until somebody realized that the actual ESP8266 had far more memory and was much faster than the actual Arduino that they were using to control it. So somebody came out with being able to control the ESP8266 with the Arduino IDE. And very soon, a dev board was actually created. This is an ESP8266 dev board. This is the actual chip itself. This is for serial communication or USB input. USB gets converted to serial with this chip over here. It has over here a regulator that takes the 5 volts that's coming in and drops it down to 3.3 volts. Then you've got the chip over here. The chip has also got a built-in Wi-Fi antenna. These boards were pretty popular for a while, and they made way for the ESP32, which is of course what our course is about. The ESP32 has got a very similar design, but it is a bit of a bigger chip. This over here is the wireless antenna over here. This over here is the actual ESP32. And again, we have a serial communication coming in. This chip over here is converting a USB to serial. And then this chip over here is a regulator, which takes the 5 volts coming in from the USB and drops it down to 3.3 volts, which then powers the chip. This particular chip is called a WROOM, or VROOM. It's a pretty popular chip. It's pretty cheap, and it can do quite a lot of stuff. It's got 4 megs of RAM built inside that, and the ESP32 itself. And it's got quite a lot of peripherals, or quite a lot of I/O pins that we can then utilize throughout the sides over here. This particular board is one of the cheapest boards that you can get on AliExpress. It's called the DevKit version 01 from doit.com. I've used these with a lot of success. They're great little dev boards. Another one that I also like very much is this one here. This is the Lowland 32. This is an older version. They've actually come out with a newer one. Again, we've got the USB over here. This chip is to create USB to serial communication. Then we've got some power regulation over here, on this side over here. And then you can see, instead of having the Wi-Fi shield like we did with this one, we have the raw chips. This shield, by the way, is pretty important and pretty good if you want to actually launch your own application, because it's certified with the appropriate shielding. This one is not shielded, so you wouldn't want to actually utilize this in a commercial product, but nonetheless, a fantastic little dev board. This is the ESP32. This is where all the fuss is all about, this tiny little chip over here. We'll have a look at the specs as to what actually is inside that thing in a moment. But we can also see on this board a 4 megabyte RAM over here. And again, we've got the wireless, the Wi-Fi antenna over here. So in comparison to the ESP8266, this has got a lot more features and functionality, including things like Bluetooth, which the ESP8266 never had. So we've had a look at 2 different ESP32s. Let's have a look at a couple more that you can get. This is another one. This is called the Rover, and it has an advantage of having a special type of RAM called PSRAM. PSRAM stands for pseudo static RAM, which has advantages in storage and speed. Here's another one. With this course, any of these ESP32 dev boards will work, but the one that I'm going to primarily utilize in my experimentations is the DevKit version 01. That's because this is probably the cheapest and most accessible to most people. And aside from that, it is just a board that I've gotten used to. So it may not be the best one, but it's good enough for anything that I've been trying to actually utilize it with. Now, as you can see, I've actually got the pins on this particular board. And if I take a breadboard, such as this one here, and I try to actually put this ESP32 on my breadboard, what you'll notice is that if I mount this chip on this board, it doesn't leave me any room on either of these sides over here to be able to put wires or connectors. Right? So the typical dev board that you get is not necessarily single board dev board friendly. However, what you can do is these boards over here usually allow you to essentially disassemble them. In other words, if you have a look, the sides can come off. And you just need to basically just tear a strip off over there. What you do is you take two of these boards and you take the one side off. So you can see that this one doesn't have a positive and negative rail. And they usually have these little sort of nooks on either end. And what you can do is just you can just hook up where there is one rail to where there is one missing rail. And then you can insert the chip over the rail in the center, essentially connecting to both boards. Just pushing that in, and then you can see it's a good connection. And then it's very easy for us to come with LEDs or resistors and just hook them across like so.